Wellington that we'd have virtually nobody here and it would be very empty. So I think it's fantastic to see so many of you here today, and I think that's also recognition of the quality of the speaker you've got in front of you. Vestager, the first executive vice president of the Commission, helping to make Europe fit for a digital age, but also with quite powerful responsibilities still in the area of competition, antitrust and merger policy. And I think the combination of those two responsibilities makes for a particularly challenging and interesting portfolio. And the Vice President is on her first trip outside Europe since she took over this new mandate, and has had some very fruitful contacts this morning with her counterparts in the Kenyan government, and a very interesting dinner last night with an eclectic mix of people from all parts of the tech industry, and the National Bank Governor, who has a strong interest in fintech. So without any further ado, let me pass the floor to the Vice President.
Dear students, guests, thank you for this very, very warm welcome. It is indeed a pleasure to be here. I know that sometimes it can feel like a stretch, but for us, coming here, it is to build a partnership. I traveled yesterday with my colleagues, 21 commissioners from the European Commission, to meet the Commission of the African Union. Never have such a big delegation of commissioners traveled outside of the European Union. So you can imagine that our protocol was kind of nervous how it would all go. But they had no need to worry, because not only would there, with good preparation on substance, be a very strong meeting of minds, but also, I think, on the personal level. Because coming to build a partnership, then you meet also heart to heart in your values. And this is why it's particularly important for me to be here today at Strathmore, because I think this is an institution who in its daily workings year after year have shown the strive to educate talent from whatever you come in this society. So I'm very proud to be here today, first to share my thoughts with you, and then, of course, obviously also to have your comments so that I will have something to take back home to Europe. This, the work that I do, as said, I'm responsible for making Europe fit for digital age, and I'm also the competitioner for competition. This has made itself visible by a strategy that we launched 2 weeks ago. It is a strategy called Shaping Europe's Digital Future. That presents the challenges, but also the opportunities of digitization. It says what our priorities, what goals are we going to pursue for the European Union. But we're not the first to do this, because in October 19, the African Union adopted its own strategy of digital transformation 2020 to 2030. And the matter of the fact is, if you take these two documents and you read them at the same time, you will find a lot of common thinking and a lot of common goals, and therefore, of course, hopefully also being able to take common action. And I think this is natural, because what people of Africa, and I think in particular young people, would want from a digital society is exactly the same as you would find in Europe. We want a technology that works for people, not the other way around. We want to harness the powers of technology to find solutions to the challenges that our society face. That could be fighting poverty, that could be fighting exclusion, to make sure that when we use digital tools, we create a society that leaves no one behind. that we want digital skills for all. Because if no digital skills, very difficult to reap the benefits of digitization. And we want sustainable technology that can help us fight climate change. We want secure and trustworthy internet where our personal data is truly protected. And we want a digital single market in our respective continents where digital companies can seize the opportunities, get scale, grow also to be global companies. And of course, we want also that internet to uphold our fundamental rights, that they strengthen our democracies and not weaken our democracies. And of course, and I think that is obvious for everyone using public services, that we would expect digital technology to help improve public services and access to public service. And that may sound like a lot, but that is what is within reach. And what for me was the important thing in this is to see that we share the fundamentals, that technology is a tool to create a citizen-centered society, where tech serves humans, where society serves citizens, and where markets serves the consumer. And from what I have learned, well, you have what it takes to be a success, because Africa is thriving. The average growth of the continent as such is more than 5.6%. The growth in Kenya is almost 5%. And much of this is linked to digitization. There are very clear trends. Access to internet has grown from about 2% 15 years ago to almost 25% as it is now. Now, as we speak, 330 million mobile internet users, and the mobile economy accounting for almost 8% of gross domestic product. There are 21 million people who shop online on the continent, growing with almost 20% annually. That is the fastest growth in the world. And here on the continent, more than 440 active tech hubs. And as you will know, Kenya clearly in the forefront to that. So what I have seen and learned here in Nairobi is deeply impressive. While I still have to carry cash in my pocket in Brussels for a number of things, basic services, well, in Kenya you'd have instant mobile payment and it will be in the pocket for everyone instead of cash. Easy, reliable, transparent and traceable. And this is what you want from payments. M-Pesa is now the world's most successful mobile money service, available in 10 countries, including in Europe, in Romania and in Albania. And a recent study showed that it has helped lift 2% of Kenyan households out of extreme poverty, and it has in particular helped female-led households. Mobile payment services has helped 180,000 women to move from farming to business occupations. And I think this is a very good and very hands-on example of the opportunities that comes with digital transformation. One of the things that we would struggle with would be legacy costs. And here, very few, if any, legacy costs. And that, of course, could allow for leapfrogging into an industrial revolution that would put this continent on par with other regions of the world. And the geographical characteristics of this amazing continent, the mountains, the beauties of the deserts and the rainforests, well, that may create challenges to traditional connectivity. Well, when it comes to digital development, well, some of these challenges can indeed be solved. And the thing is that Africa have a resource that is envied all over the world. And that is not raw material, that is not oil, that is you. Young people, talented people, who have their mindset to be successful, to make something of themselves. And I think the estimate is between 15 and 20 million increasingly well-educated people, as yourself, to enter the workforce on the continent every year for the next 3 decades. That will provide drive for economic progress. You will be the ones who can produce, process, and draw benefits from the running fuel of the digital age, which is data. So you have what it takes to become successful in an increasingly digital world. The question, of course, is, well, then how? Where to get started? How to make this happen? How to ensure that the negative things that comes with digitization do not overwhelm the potential and all the positive things. Because I think that when we look across the world and we see the different models, we've also seen how different ways of dealing with technology can come with downsides, also very important downsides. We have seen the perils of technology when used by governments to control the internet, to suppress freedom of individuals, freedom of speech, freedom to organize, freedom to do what you want to do. We have observed the damages to our democracies when it comes to the spreads of disinformation, of recruitment to terrorism or terrorist content online. We have seen the risk to people's privacy when there's no constraints as to what governments or companies can collect or can do with people's data once collected. And the thing is, I don't think that technology is either good or bad, but it is quite clear from what we have seen and what we have experienced so far that it all depends on how you put it into use. Because it can be a force for good just as well as it can be a force for evil. And this is why, well, it is an important and very fundamental question to ask oneself: what kind of digital transformation do we want for our economies and societies? Because I think there is there's a given here. The digital transformation will come. The question is whether or not in our democracies we will take a responsibility to shape our digital future, to make sure that it's our digital future. And we set out to answer at least partly that question last year with a common digital economy task force between the European Commission and the African Union. And this was a platform of partnership for African and European private sector representatives, for donors, for international organizations, for financial institutions, and for civil society. And I would like in particular to pay tribute to African Union Commissioner Amani Abu Said. She truly engaged and supported the work of the task force. And now that work is underpinning the realization that Africa and Europe share objectives and share a common vision to develop an inclusive digital economy and a society in which every citizen will have the opportunity to benefit from digitization. In other words, that this is based on a human-centric digital transformation. In this endeavor, I think that we have a lot to learn from each other. And this is, of course, why the European Union would want to be a partner to Africa. And as said yesterday, we traveled 21 commissioners to Addis Ababa for our annual meeting with the African Union Commission. And this is something that is happening. This is for real. This is not just meetings that are ongoing, minutes being taken and then being stored. And one of the reasons why we think that this is a real thing is that we keep engaging. And Europe is the closest partner of the African continent. For every euro that China or the US invests in Africa, the European Union invests 5. Africa exports to Europe twice as much as to China and 4 times as much as to the United States. So both when it comes to investment and when it comes to trade, we have very, very strong ties with one another. Also, if you look at the partnership when it comes to assistance to Africa, half of everything official comes from European Union. So we have everything that it takes to build an even stronger relationship. So let me give you just a couple of examples before I will end. One thing would be access to affordable broadband. This is the challenge, I think, for both continents. And this is a thing where substantial investment is needed. We have been partnering up with African regional organizations to develop what we call the 3rd iteration of the Africa Connect project, which supports internet connectivity in 19 countries. In Zambia, as one example, the National Research and Education Network multiplied its internet capacity by 60 times, while cost drops 94%. 94% over a 4-year period of time. Employers across Africa identify skill gaps as a significant constraint to their ability to compete in the global economy. This includes 30% of firms in Kenya, and it's almost the same number in Europe. More than a quarter of all small and medium-sized businesses, they say that requiring skilled people is their main obstacle to grow. And this is why we extended what we call the Erasmus Plus program 2 years ago. 35,000 African students and academic staff have had higher education scholarships to European universities with a strong focus on digital skills, and more than 4,000 Europeans have visited African universities. And these are real scholarships. It's travel is paid, accommodation is paid, living cost is paid, the studies are paid for. It is basically the same as a free lottery ticket. It's just to enter, and you may be able to get a draw. And we work with governments across the African continent to enhance citizens' digital rights. And one of the things that made me come to Kenya was that I learned that Kenya is one of the first countries on this continent to pass legislation to protect privacy, to protect the data of each individual, to make sure that we are seen as real people and not just as data points when it comes to the digital economy. And here you see a meeting of minds, because the Kenyan regulation very much resembles what we have been doing in Europe in our general data regulation, general data protection regulation. And last but not least, we can do great things together by using digital technology to boost our fight against climate change. Here in Strathmore, you have the Kenya Climate Innovation Center that provides support for new ventures and innovation solution for clean technology, for water and agricultural technologies. I'll be visiting this center later today. And last but not least, the digitization of government and administration. Well, not only can you improve quality and reduce cost, you can also improve accountability. That you can actually, as a taxpayer, follow what you do get for the money that you pay in taxes. We have collaborated with a number of organizations that produce monitoring tool for government activities. And it is a great comfort for a taxpayer to know that your money is actually going to provide high-quality public services. That was actually not just a few examples. Those were many. And I do hope that they underpin that this is not just a speech on a beautiful day in this wonderful university. This is for real. The digital transformation has started. It has started here. It has started on this continent. It has started in Europe. And we can choose to shape it. It will happen no matter what we do. I think that the decisions have been taken already, that we want a human-centric, that we want societies that uses digitization as a tool. Because used well, technology holds enormous potential. They can fundamentally enable us to reach our sustainable development goals. Used unwell, well, they can shake our societies. They can create unbelievable digital divides. But they can also make societies inclusive, reduce inequalities, and strengthen our democracies instead of the opposite. And that requires a clear vision, a common determination to make sure that we do put citizens at the center of this transformation. And for that, you'd always find a friend in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for that wonderful speech. I think the main core theme of it all has been the question of partnership and engagement in Africa. And now I would like to open this conversation to the students who are in the room, or the people who are in the room. Just for you to know, we have students who are doing law here, we have students who are doing information systems, and we have students who are also studying international relations. So the question may be a bit wide, but we'll see how it goes. So, can we open this to the floor? Okay, we take the first two this side.
Good afternoon. My name is Kennedy Ongoro. I work as a graduate assistant in School of Business. And I hope my sentiments are held very, very importantly. Number one, I'd like to say that you realize that in Kenya, we have agriculture bringing in 27% of the GDP. We also have 60% of our exports in trade goods being majorly from agriculture. And 80% of the Kenyan population depend on agriculture. That just tells you how much agriculture is important to us as a nation. So when you ask about how Europe can be able to help us develop human-centric digital tools to be able to bring our people out of poverty or to be able to help our people, then I really think we can be able to explore this in terms of being able to do disintermediation. We have a situation in which in our country, it has happened a lot in the coffee and in the tea industry, where we realize that the real farmers are not the ones that benefit most from the sale. And I really think if that's the same thing that will happen to the other sectors, then our farmers will not benefit as much. There's a concept of comparative advantage. And this is what has helped China develop to a very big extent. China is considered the factory of the world because they're able to keep costs down and being able to produce at a cheaper cost than the rest of the countries. And you realize that in Africa we have arable land, large tracts of arable land. And labor is also available cheaply. So that means we can be able to produce agricultural products at a very cheap cost compared to what other countries would do it as. So I'd really, really advise that if you are going to help Kenya, maybe do away with reduced poverty, then the biggest point that we'll need coordination is in the agricultural sector. So if that's going to happen, then we can be able to develop a model where our farmers can be able to sell directly to Europe, so that when the money is disbursed, then we can be able to attest that it goes to our farmers. But for as long as you do trade with the intermediaries, our farmers don't get to benefit at the end of the day. So we're in a continuous cycle of poverty. And you also realize that right now, if we rely on the white-collar jobs, it's not going to work because jobs are not enough. So we have to rely on the mainstay activities that can be able to lift our people out of poverty. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's keep the questions short so that we can have a wider number of people asking their questions.
Thank you. I have two questions that are interconnected. The first is whether, sorry, I'm Chris, sorry. I wanted to know whether the immigrants from around would get training on how to use digitization, how to exploit digitization efforts, because some of them are coming from war zones and they need to find a job. But as you stated, the world is becoming more digitized. So I wanted to know how Europe is going about that, if they have trainings of sorts, and also for those people who are already working but have been replaced by digitization. Thank you.
Maybe she can first respond to those two, and then we pick others from the other side, please.
Well, thank you very much. Well, agriculture is not only a force of Kenya, it's also a force of our global economy, because we're going to feed many more people on this planet. So agriculture is of crucial importance that we get this right. And what we see is sort of a number of things that can happen at the same time. I'd say one of the things that you mentioned have been seen in Europe as well. I sense that there is an on and off. Has been a thing in Europe as well, where we see that the first part of the value chain, they get way too little of the value added in the value chain. So we have felt the need also to legislate to make sure that we balance unfair trading practices. Of course, there will always be a fight between the different parts of the value chain, also when it comes to food. But it can be that the individual farmer is way too small to have sufficient negotiating power towards the people all the way up to retail, which is why we have passed legislation also to make sure that negotiating relationship is more balanced. We see that there's a lot of use for digitization here, both when it comes to sharing knowledge and knowing what is ongoing in the marketplace, so that you know what is the end prices of your products, because that puts you in a stronger negotiating position when you see how much the intermediary would actually take as a profit in the value chain. The second place where we see digitization can help is to organize logistics. That via platforms, small logistic providers can be available when you actually need it, so that you can get your logistics streamlined and make sure that produce is not wasted because of that logistics, because it then deteriorates on the way. Last but not least, for agriculture to play this very substantial role in our global economy, for that to develop into what we would call precision farming, that you get many more data points as a farmer to help you use water, pesticides, different ways of treating your land to get that better organized. We see that now also with small farmers in Europe, say people who would grow olives for making olive oil, not necessarily industrial farming, but industrial farming as well. It's just to say that being small or being big, that's not necessarily the trigger point here. The point is, if you see that it is of strategic importance to you to know the combination of water, pesticide, quality of soil, when you sow, how you do the treatment of plants. And in some of the things that we have been doing, we see that the use of water is going down dramatically, the use of pesticides are going down dramatically, but the quality of your produce is going up. So basically, everywhere you look, you'd see that here there is a room for improvement by using digital technologies, and make sure that farmers are not foreclosed, but have their own data available. And I'd say that's an obvious place to partner up. On the question on migrants, here actually sometimes we see a negative side of digitization, because we see a lot of fake news being spread to people who might have the idea to migrate, but to do that illegally. And then they set out on a journey which is potentially deadly, because the risk that they face on their travel is beyond what can be justified with the possibility of being accepted if you come as an illegal immigrant. Where digital can provide things for you is to have the skills, because what we're trying to do is to close down on the extremely dangerous, very often funneled by criminal organizations with a lot of lost lives as a consequence, to close down on that and to open path for legal migration, so that you come in an organized manner because your skills and your talent is actually in demand. At the same time, we see that with technology, because so many people right now would have smartphones because they come at quite low cost, that where people are displaced, you can offer them distributed learning because you can give them programs that they would otherwise not have access to. That can both be live streamed, but it can also come with an SD card that you get learning opportunities that you would otherwise not have had. Because in the first place, it's horrible that you're displaced from your home. So your present is stolen, but that your future is ruined as well because of lack of opportunities of learning. Here, digital solution can be part of what the societies around you can provide to you.
Thank you very much.
And the last, you also asked about being displaced by digital. That is a thing that is widely feared, that the digital revolution will displace people. What we have seen so far is that new types of jobs are being created. And what we're trying to do is to make sure that people can get reskilled or upskilled actually to meet the new demands of the new jobs being created. Because it may be so if you're in traditional sector and you're being unemployed because it closes down for, it could be a digital reason, and you see another job being provided, you say, well, this may be for my son or my daughter, but never for me because I don't have the skills. Then for the society to provide a learning path, actually to see yourself also as maybe a person at my age, to see I can require the relevant skills to be part of a new economy. That doesn't come without cost, but that's a way to go.
Thank you, thank you. It's on and off, as you said, huh?
Hello, my name is Noel, and you had mentioned about sustainable tech and how it can fight climate change. So I had an idea, right? If we can have digitized container farming and using hydroponics, that way it solves the logistics issue that the plants are still growing as they're being transported. So there's no waste. They can be transported. They're very durable. They can be transported to refugee camps and very arid areas that need this food. So and that can also reduce amount of land that is used under farming, because now people can plant trees. Now for such ventures, how can we partner with the EU to digitize this container farming, and how can other people with other ideas partner with the EU for this?
the Vice President, Margaret, our Honorable VC designate, and all protocol observed. Good afternoon. My name is Don Kamoya. I'm a second year BBIT student. That's Business Information Technology. And my question today is, what should my fellow students and I do differently, or what advice would you give us to take advantage of this partnership and the digital revolution to make an impact in our country and the continent at large?
Hello, everyone. My question is, over the years, we've seen the advancement of technology lead to an increased drift between the rich and the poor people. Yeah. So for a country like Kenya, where we have such a large population and such a large growth rate, and most of the people rely on manual labor as a means of getting an income, the advancement of technology will actually ease the processes that are involved in manufacturing and things like such. But my question is, with the advancement of technology and the easing of production and things like those, how will we cater for those people who cannot afford to get the technology and those people who do not know how to use the technology? How will they be able to get their daily bread?
I'm not familiar with container farming, which is an error on my side. The farthest I have come to containers and food is the idea to say, well, if you can provide containers also in agricultural areas where you would otherwise not have storage capacity, well, then you can do your harvest as so that you can for instance, pick the fruit when it's sufficiently ripe to go to market, but not so ripe that it will deteriorate while going to the market. And you can do that in an orderly manner because you have storage at present. And you will have these climate-controlled containers that will allow you to do this. And then eventually, when you have sufficient to go to the market, you can move the container and you will have fresh produce that will actually meet the market demand. I can see a lot of potential in your idea, and I think a place like here, where you have an incubator environment, this is a place to go, to sort of to do a proof of concept, to see, well, what is it that we need? Because your point about the need to plant trees is an obvious one, because not only should we fight climate change, but we'll also have to adjust to the unavoidable consequences. And here, forestation is part of that solution. So that is what I would do to find a partner. Yes.
A 30 million euro program to provide support for innovative ideas in the agricultural sector, and it's precisely such ideas that the program is thinking about supporting.
Now that's an ambassador. On the second thing, I really like your question about how to what should one do to have an impact. In order to be a commissioner, you have to go through a hearing. It's as impressive as this. You have people around you; they can ask you everything. And people were worried about, well, what about China? They have so much data. What about the US? They invest so much. And my point was to say, well, it may be so that China has a lot of data, and it may be so that the US invest a lot. But in Europe, we have purpose. There's something that we want to achieve. We want to have better health. We want to have better connectivity. We want the urban and the rural areas to come together so that you also feel that you have opportunities outside of the bigger cities. There are things that we want to do with the way we use technology. And that is a driver stronger than having all the data in the world or all the money in the world, because we know why we want to use data, we know why we want to use money. And I found it inspiring also yesterday when the governor of the Central Bank of Kenya was so generous with his time to spend the evening with my team and myself. And that is also what I ask. When people come with a brilliant idea, I ask them, what problem do you solve? And he was not thinking about the problem about you not being rich yet. He was thinking about the problem of other people, of your community, of your society. And I think if that is the question one asks oneself, that will take you very, very far. Because that is also what creates enthusiasm with fellow students, with coming investors, with coming partners, that you have a purpose for what you want to do. And finding it here so strongly, that I find is really encouraging, because then actually one can build that human-centric society. And every startup will not revolutionize everything in the entire world, but I think every startup can be part of the solution. Because if you can provide, for instance, low-cost diagnostics, so people actually know what is wrong with me and they can afford to get that diagnostics done, well, you have solved something. If you can enable people to know what are the prices in the marketplace so I get a better deal with my intermediaries, you get a better deal. If you can help reduce costs at the retail level, because you can sort of bypass some of the intermediaries. As a startup I heard about yesterday, you really make an effort because you can make the percentage of money that you use for food, make that come down. And what I learned yesterday was in many families it's 50% or more of your income that you'll have to use for food. So if you can make that come down, well, then you have money for something else. So whenever you find your niche that has this idea, how can I solve a problem somewhere? Well, then you're part of something common and you will create the enthusiasm around you. On the digital divide, I don't know if any of you have seen the Korean movie Pesticides, the one that got the Parasite, that got the Oscar. I found it amazing to see that the poor family, they almost had their phones glued to their hands. And the biggest bad thing that could happen was that Wi-Fi disappeared. Because then they completely disconnected to whatever job they could have, whatever money they could make. If you looked at the rich family, the son was into painting, the daughter was into learning language, not from Babel or whatever on her phone, but from a real human teacher. And the mother was into worrying, so she was in a more traditional business. But what you saw was a different kind of digital divide. The rich family, they made their money on digital gadgets. And they got rich because of the poor people being basically data points, while they themselves did what traditionally has made us happy. Art, languages, coming together, being with friends. And that, I think, is as important a digital divide as not having access to connectivity, that you forget what is sort of the human thing to do, and you let yourself disappear in that black slate of a screen, or your own space where you may connect with someone very far away, but not with the person next to you. So I think that's an important thing to carry with oneself, that connectivity can never, ever replace being connected with the person next to you and your family. What we have learned is for people who do not have connectivity or the hardware is, first, you're never too old to learn. And if there is a drive, then you might want to do it. A lot of people in my country would take up digital very late in life because their grandchildren live far away. And they would want to be able to FaceTime, they would want to be able to stay in touch. And then, of course, and that is, I think, important for the market to provide, that costs are coming down. Cost of the hardware and cost of connectivity. And this is one of the things that we are partnering up in doing, as the example of connectivity, prices coming down by 94%. So that if you want to and people around you help you, you have the possibility of being part of it.
I want to take the last two questions, and I want to be biased. Can I have the ladies? Yes? Two ladies. There's one there, and there's one there. So I'll have, four ladies. Let's start here.
Good afternoon. My question is quite simple. By virtue of applying for a job online, usually it means you give some personal information. So how will this affect digitization as well as maintain privacy laws?
My name is Florence, a research assistant at CIPIT. So my question goes in line. CIPIT is the Center for Intellectual Property and Information Technology. My question goes in line with her question in relation to privacy laws. You've mentioned that Kenya has previously just enacted its very first legislations on data protection regulations, which are quite similar and mirror the GDPR as it is. So my question would be, in terms of personal identification being digitized, what continued roles will the EU have in ensuring and influencing continued development of policies that ensure personal data protection in the data sphere?
Same question? Same question? No.
Good afternoon. My name is Dana. I'm a student here, and I'm honored to be in this room. My question is tied to cities. Presently, cities occupy about 1 to 3% of the world space, and majority of the population, about 4 billion, are presently in cities. And the UN projects that by 2047, this will be 68%. So trying to understand how the digital transformation will affect the city space and what Kenya can do as a country to just tap into that in line with the AU and the EU plan. That's my question.
Good afternoon. My name is Lillian. I'm a student of international studies, and my very concerned question is about the administration of social justice using digitization to the refugee seekers in the European Union, especially in the Schengen area, where there's a stereotype that the refugees from Africa are the ones who are instigating and, making terrorism become the bigger issue just because they are there. So how would you protect the refugees and the migrants using digitization? Thank you.
I think I opened a can of worms when I said
These are, I think this is very important, because when you apply for a job, you hand out a lot of personal information. Who you are, how to get in touch, your CV, what you can provide, the company where you're looking for a job. Our privacy regulation would say, well, a company can keep that information, but only for 6 months, and they can only use it for the hiring purpose. They cannot take that data and use it for something else. That would not be a legal thing to do. The second thing, and this has to do with also the answer of the last question, is that when they use, for instance, artificial intelligence in their hiring procedures, that these are non-biased. Because I think one can imagine a business, they have some open positions, they may get thousands of applications. So they would ask artificial intelligence to go through these applications to find out the ones that are most relevant for the open positions. And what is then important is that that artificial intelligence is not biased. So we would put technology that helps you in doing hiring in a specific sort of risk category, because we find that just as well there's a lot of promise in artificial intelligence, one of the downsides may be to fundamental values. That the fundamental value of being non-discriminated, that there's no bias in what you do. Well, if there is a risk of that, well, then the technology will have to be checked before it's put to use. Because otherwise there is a risk that our human biases, they are just reflected and they become bigger when they become embedded in technology. So those two sides in the hiring position, because you're very right to say, well, this is a very vulnerable point in your working life, whether or not you get a fair treatment when you apply for a job. On the second question on EID, a number of European member states, they would have EID, that you can identify yourself in a digital way. One of the things that we would like to offer is that to be a thing that you can have all over the European Union, and that there is mutual recognition, so that, for instance, my Danish EID is compatible with how they do that in Germany, how they do that in another country. Because the thing is that in many instances, you're asked to identify yourself in a way that allows the service provider to pick up a lot of data about you, where your sort of official ID only give away so much data as to identify you. And you would like to do the last thing. Of course, you would like to be able to identify yourself. We know who is this person. But you do not want that identification to be an event that will allow all kind of data about you, what you're doing with the services, to be disseminated to others. So that for us is work in progress. But we find that it is quite promising, also because the more public service, government services that becomes digital, the bigger is the need that you can actually access those also from abroad. Because with free mobility, well, then you may need to be in touch with your home government services also outside of your borders. So that is the thing that we're pushing. When it comes to cities, and I have read the statistics too, that eventually we will, almost all of us, live in cities. I think there is an important choice to be made, because there is a sort of a very sort of technological, promising sort of smart city fix, that we can all sort of streamline city life, get in control of circular economy so that we do not produce so much waste, that transportation is all streamlined. What I find important is that we make sure that we do not make a city just one large surveillance unit. Because the risk is, of course, with everything becoming smart, our movement is part of that smartness. I really love my mom. And it's quite rare I do something that she would not approve of. But I don't want to be with her at all times. And that is kind of the risk I see if we make cities sort of these surveillance units. That it will do something about how you behave in public space. Not because you do something that is illegal, not because you do something that could be criticized, but just the sheer knowledge that you're always under surveillance will change the way you behave, with whom you talk, how you linger, if you jump, if, you know, everything. And that, I think, is a very important debate to keep alive, because we need a lot of the digital solutions to make giant cities work, but we don't want to turn them into surveillance units. Last but not least, I think the point about social justice is a very important one. Because one of the risks of technology is that human biases and stereotypes and the wrong things that we do, that they get accelerated when used with technology. Because you are what you eat, same goes with technology. It's not better than the data that has fed it. So to make sure that data used, for instance, at borders, that this is non-biased, is a very high priority for us. Because we really want to fight the stereotypes, because otherwise you're not safe. If you base yourself on stereotypes, of course, you will not see the real threat, because that will hide here or there or in a third place, while you will just lose the backing and the sense of belonging from all the people that you distance yourself from. So that is one of the things of which we are very observant. The thing is that for us it's important that we know who's coming and going within the European Union. And this is why we put a lot of effort into registering people when they arrive in the Union, legally or illegally. And that is because we know, as we spoke about before, there are criminal industrial structures behind some of the illegal migration. And we know how many people disappear. Children disappear, women disappear, men disappear. And this is why, of course, registration is very important. But for us, to that happen for the best purpose and not to accentuate biases that would otherwise be at risk. So, of course, it's tricky, but, of course, it's our mission to make sure that we get things right.
Your Excellency, since I'm next to the mic, I'll sneak in a question. So, what parting advice could you give our students in order to help them have an incredibly good career and to be exceptionally good citizens of our planet?
Well, you have made the first right choice to study here, of course. That goes without saying. And as I said in my introduction, to have an environment as here, when you welcome people from very different social backgrounds, from very different geographies, it's not just a pleasantry to say that this is a good thing, because it gives you skills that you would otherwise not occupy. And since I also know that you have a lot of extracurricular activities, this is, I think, sort of a first thing that you could do is to engage, if you have the resources, in things next to what you have to do in class. Because very often this is where you learn some of the organizational skills, to do the reach out, to build the community around you. That never comes from a textbook. That never comes, from a professor in the end of an auditorium. Yeah. Well, at least not where I studied. Of course, it can be very, very different here. No, that comes from taking what comes from the textbook, what comes from the lectures, and take that into real life. And that real life can happen while still being at university, while still being a student. And I think that is the best thing. If one wants to be a full citizen, then engage in the society where you are. Not in a year, not in 5 years' time, but right now. Because this is where you get the sense of belonging and the sense of purpose.
Thank you very much. Another round of applause, please. And now, Your Excellency, we request you that Catherine, who has been a student leader here, to move a vote of thanks, after which we will have a small little, we are African, so you won't talk away with nothing. We feed you, and then we give you something to go home with. Huh? So, Catherine, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, all protocols observed. I am honored to be standing here in front of all of you, giving this vote of thanks. As you've heard, my name is Catherine Mumo. I am a fourth-year student of International Studies. Let me start by saying thank you very much, Your Excellency, and your team. Margrethe, sorry, I'm going to try and pronounce your names. Kindly bear with me. Margrethe Verstegen, Kim Jorgensen, Alejandro Cansos, Simon Mordu, Katrin Hangeman, Guy Harrison, and Beatrice Hongo. Thank you very much for making time to be here with us.
We are honored that you have taken the chance to come to Strathmore University as one of your first visits as you began your term, and we are grateful that you've come, and we wish you all the best, you and your fellow commissioners, during your term. I'd also like to thank the EU delegation, Ambassador, for the support that you've given us in Kenya and for the various events that you have taken part in. The relationship between the EU and Strathmore dates back to the very development of the first phase of this university, and we thank you for your continued support since then up to now. We are grateful for the support and for having us here in this room. As students, we are honored because this is an opportunity that comes once in a lifetime. So we are grateful to have sat in this room and learnt a lot. Thank you for the lecture. You have enlightened us and taught us quite a lot. To the university management, Dr. Ogutu, Dr. Mungai, and Professor Da Silva, thank you very much for organizing such events that give us as students such wonderful opportunities and networking opportunities. And again, to each and every single student here, thank you for taking time to attend and for the questions that you've asked. I think it's very important that the voice of the youth is heard, and us being present here shows the commitment to involve the youth in various activities. So again, thank you all for being here, and again, it's been a pleasure to have you, and it's been a pleasure to give this vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now, Dr. Gutu will hand over our small little gift. A round of applause, please. Thank you very much. This comes to the end of our session today. Please, students, you can wait for our guests to leave, and then after that, we can walk in after them. Thank you very much. A round of applause, please. Thank you.